Before we begin, if you love emotional and inspiring stories that touch your heart, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications so you never miss another unforgettable story. Now, let's begin. The morning sky over the international airport was covered with dark gray clouds. Business executives rushed through the terminal while private jets prepared for departure. It looked like an ordinary morning, until one unexpected problem brought everything to a complete stop. A luxurious private jet belonging to billionaire CEO Alexander Carter suddenly refused to start. The aircraft had been scheduled to leave in less than an hour for one of the biggest business meetings of Carter's career. Millions of dollars depended on that flight. Airport engineers surrounded the aircraft, connecting computers, checking wires, replacing parts, and running every possible diagnostic. Nothing worked. Every passing minute made the CEO more frustrated. Alexander Carter wasn't known for his patience. He built one of the largest aviation companies in the country by demanding perfection from everyone around him. Failure wasn't something he accepted. "If this plane isn't flying in 30 minutes, he shouted, "every one of you will be looking for a new job." The mechanics lowered their heads. Nobody knew what else to try. Just then, an older pickup truck rolled slowly into the maintenance area. A man stepped out wearing faded blue mechanic overalls stained with oil and grease. His name was David Parker. Most people at the airport barely noticed him. To them, he was just another maintenance worker. But those who truly knew David understood something different. He had an extraordinary gift for repairing engines. People often joked that David could hear problems that machines themselves couldn't explain. Yet despite his incredible talent, life had never been easy. He wasn't wealthy. He didn't own a fancy house. He didn't drive an expensive car. Everything he earned went toward raising his 8-year-old daughter, Emma. Years earlier, David's wife had passed away after a long illness. Since that heartbreaking day, he had devoted every moment of his life to being both a father and a mother for his little girl. Every morning he packed her lunch. Every evening he helped with homework. Every night he sat beside her bed until she fell asleep. But there was one question Emma asked that broke his heart every single time. "Daddy, when my school has Mother's Day, who should I bring?" David never had an answer. Sometimes he simply hugged her. Sometimes he smiled while secretly wiping away tears after she fell asleep. His greatest dream wasn't becoming rich. It wasn't owning a business. It wasn't becoming famous. His only dream was seeing his daughter smile again. Back at the airport, David quietly walked toward the disabled jet. One of the engineers laughed. "What are you doing here? You think you can fix what an entire engineering team couldn't?" David didn't argue. He simply smiled. "May I take a look?" The CEO folded his arms. "You have 15 minutes. If you fix my plane, I'll grant you one wish." Everyone laughed. They expected David to fail within minutes. But David opened the engine panel, closed his eyes for a moment, and listened carefully. He wasn't just hearing the engine. He was understanding it. After several minutes, he picked up a simple wrench. He tightened one hidden connection, adjusted a damaged fuel sensor, replaced a small burned relay that everyone else had overlooked. Then he stepped back. "Try it now." One mechanic turned the ignition. For a brief second, silence. Then, the engines roared to life with perfect power. The entire hangar froze. Nobody could believe what they were hearing. The aircraft was running perfectly. The engineers stared in complete disbelief. Alexander Carter slowly walked toward David. For the first time that morning, the billionaire smiled. "You actually did it. A promise is a promise. Tell me your wish." Everyone expected David to ask for money. A luxury house, a new workshop, or perhaps $1 million reward. Instead, David looked down at the ground. His voice became almost a whisper. "I don't want money. I don't want a promotion. I don't want a new house. My daughter needs a mother." The entire hangar fell silent. Even the wind seemed to stop. For the first time in many years, the billionaire CEO had no words. Alexander Carter stood frozen. The words echoed through his mind. My daughter needs a mother. It wasn't the answer he had expected. For years, people had come to him asking for money, luxury cars, expensive homes, business investments, or executive positions. No one had ever asked for something so simple, and so impossible. The billionaire looked into David's tired eyes. There was no greed, no hidden agenda, only the quiet pain of a father who wanted his little girl to grow up surrounded by love. For the first time in years, Alexander felt something he had buried deep inside his heart. Compassion. He cleared his throat. I can't magically give your daughter a mother. David nodded. I know that, sir. I never expected you could. I just wanted someone to hear the wish I've carried in my heart for years. Those words struck Alexander harder than any business loss ever had. As his private jet disappeared into the clouds later that morning, he couldn't stop thinking about David and Emma. During the entire flight, he ignored business reports. He barely looked at his phone. Instead, he stared out the window, replaying the conversation over and over again. That evening, after returning home, he walked into his enormous mansion. The house was worth millions of dollars. Every room was filled with expensive furniture, priceless artwork, and luxury. Yet, it was painfully silent. There were no children's footsteps. No laughter. No family waiting to welcome him home. Only empty hallways. Alexander slowly walked into his late wife's old study. She had passed away several years earlier after battling cancer. Since then, he had buried himself in work, convincing himself that success could replace loneliness. It never did. He picked up an old framed photograph. In it, he and his wife were smiling together during happier days. For the first time in years, a tear rolled down his cheek. Meanwhile, across town, David was preparing dinner for Emma. It wasn't anything fancy, just homemade soup and grilled sandwiches. Emma ran into the kitchen wearing her school uniform. Daddy, I got an A on my science project. David smiled proudly. I knew you could do it. Emma hugged him tightly. Then she quietly asked, Daddy, did something good happen at work today? David hesitated. Maybe. What happened? A very important man promised he would grant me one wish. Emma's eyes sparkled. What did you wish for? David looked away for a moment. Then he gently brushed a strand of hair away from her face. I wished for your happiness. Emma smiled. You always wish for me. David laughed softly. That's because you're my whole world. The next morning, Alexander arrived at his company headquarters. Instead of heading straight into a board meeting, he called his personal assistant. I want every piece of information you can find about David Parker. The assistant looked confused. The mechanic from the airport? Yes, everything. By afternoon, a thick file landed on Alexander's desk. He opened it slowly. Inside were medical bills, school payment receipts, late rent notices, old photographs, letters, and one heartbreaking report. David had turned down several high-paying jobs in other cities. Why? Because moving away would have forced Emma to leave the only school where she still felt close to the memory of her mother. Alexander leaned back in his chair. Most people chased bigger salaries. David had sacrificed everything, simply to protect his daughter's happiness. At that moment, the billionaire made a decision. He wasn't going to grant David's wish with money. He was going to change both of their lives forever. But he had no idea that someone from David's past was about to return. Someone Emma had never forgotten. Someone whose arrival would change everything. To be continued. The following Monday began like any other. David dropped Emma off at school with a warm smile and a gentle reminder. Be kind to everyone. Emma nodded. I always am, Daddy. David watched her disappear through the school gates before driving to the airport, unaware that his life was about to change forever. At the same moment, Alexander Carter was sitting in his office, staring once again at David's file. The more he learned about the humble mechanic, the more respect he felt. David had never asked for charity. He had never complained about his struggles. He simply worked hard every single day, hoping his daughter would have a better future. Alexander finally stood up. Bring David Parker to my office. A few hours later, David arrived, nervous and confused. He had never stepped inside such a luxurious building. Glass walls stretched toward the ceiling. Marble floors reflected the sunlight. Employees in expensive suits rushed through the hallways. David felt completely out of place. Alexander welcomed him with a smile. "Please, have a seat." David sat quietly. "I've been thinking about your wish," Alexander said. David lowered his eyes. "You don't have to do anything, sir. I know no one can simply give my daughter a mother." Alexander nodded. "You're right, but maybe someone can help give her a better future." He slid several documents across the desk. David looked down in surprise. It was an employment contract. Not as a mechanic, but as the head of aircraft maintenance for the CEO's entire aviation company. The salary was more money than David had earned in several years. There was health insurance, a company house, educational support for Emma, paid vacations. David could hardly breathe. There must be some mistake. Alexander smiled. "There isn't. You earned this." Tears filled David's eyes. For the first time since losing his wife, he felt hope. Weeks passed. David started his new position. His honesty and kindness quickly earned everyone's respect. Unlike many managers, he never forgot where he came from. He treated every employee equally. Meanwhile, Emma adjusted to her new school. She made friends easily. But one afternoon, something unexpected happened. Her teacher announced a special family day celebration. Every child was invited to bring both parents. Emma quietly lowered her head. That evening, she asked her father, "Daddy, can we skip family day?" David forced a smile. "Why?" "Because everyone else will have a mom." David hugged her tightly. Before he could answer, the doorbell rang. Standing outside was Alexander Carter. Beside him stood a kind-hearted woman named Grace. Grace had spent years volunteering at children's hospitals and family support centers after losing her own fiancé in a tragic accident. She understood loneliness. She understood grief. Most importantly, she genuinely cared about children. Alexander introduced them. "David, I'd like you to meet someone." Over the following months, Grace became a close family friend. She never tried to replace Emma's mother. Instead, she listened. She cared. She helped with homework. She attended school events. She baked cookies with Emma. She laughed with her. Slowly, the empty spaces inside their home began to fill with warmth again. David admired Grace's kindness but never rushed anything. He respected her. She respected him. And Emma simply loved spending time with her. One evening, while watching the sunset from a nearby park, Emma quietly reached for Grace's hand. "Can I ask you something?" Grace smiled. "Of course." Emma took a deep breath. "You don't have to answer. But, would you ever want to be part of our family?" Grace's eyes filled with tears. She looked at David. He smiled softly. Months later, David invited Grace to the very airport where everything had begun. The same runway, the same sunset, the same place where one simple wish had changed everything. Holding a small ring in his trembling hands, David said, "The day I fixed a plane. I thought I was asking for the impossible. But life had a better plan. Grace, will you marry me?" Through happy tears, she whispered, "Yes." Emma jumped into both of their arms. "I finally have a family." Months later, the wedding was small and beautiful. Alexander Carter stood proudly as David's best man. When it was time for speeches, the billionaire stepped forward. He smiled at the happy family before him. "I once believed success meant money. I was wrong. The richest man in this room isn't me. It's David, because he never stopped fighting for the people he loved." The guests applauded. Emma hugged both David and Grace tightly. For the first time in many years, she looked up with complete happiness and quietly said, "I love